Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is Brendan Rose's memoir excerpts, a text that is, well, just defined by its raw intensity and the deeply conflicted relationship he describes with his ex-wife, Jialin.
It's a very challenging document. I mean, the extreme nature of Brendan's claims, accusing Jialin of being literally the devil, or definitively asserting that the child is not my son, it really forces us to question the reliability of the entire narrative.
Exactly. And so the central question before us is, I think this. Do the documented actions of Jialin provide sufficient, objective justification for Brendan's extreme conclusions of betrayal and paternity doubt?
Or are these conclusions primarily psychological manifestations fueled by his own well-documented mental volatility and what seems to be a profound sense of abandonment?
I will argue that Jialin's history of documented destabilizing behavior provides a rational, almost an experiential foundation for Brendan's ultimate, albeit very extreme, narrative conclusions.
And I will argue the opposite, that the internal context provided by the memoir itself, Brendan's unmedicated state, his self-identification with these darker spiritual themes, and his subsequent institutionalizations, while it demands a cautious reading. It compels us to interpret these claims as expressions of his inner turmoil, rather than objective, verifiable facts.
Well, let's start with her behavior. When we look at Jialin's actions as Brendan describes them, a pattern emerges very quickly that establishes grounds for distrust. This isn't just one incident. It's a chronic issue that begins almost immediately. Taking pictures with another man just 2 months into the relationship, exchanging flirtatious hearts with someone the night before their wedding, and continually maintaining what he sees as inappropriate contact with other men throughout the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And these incidents, they're coupled with repeated acts of, financial irresponsibility, stealing work money, and profound abandonment. He describes her going missing for 1 to 3 days, dozens of times. So the question is direct: was Jialin cheating? Her pattern of behavior certainly appeared designed to cultivate that suspicion, whether that was her intention or not. Given this foundation of deceit, Brendan's final statements, "Neko is dead, he is not my son," they become the painful but narratively consistent summation of years of perceived betrayal. They aren't just random insults.
I see why you rely so heavily on that chronology of her actions. But the evidence of Brendan's state of mind is equally chronological, and I think perhaps more significant. We can't just isolate Jialin's external behavior from the highly compromised mental state of the narrator.
Sure.
The source material provides crucial, self-incriminating context. Brendan admits to flushing his medication, foolish vice that would ruin me again and again, and that leads directly to repeated institutionalizations. And critically, his insanity would start to build, as he puts it, right when Jialin became pregnant in January 2021, and then he ditched all his medication a month later. So the memoir we're reading isn't just a record of events. It's a chronicle viewed through the lens of extreme unmedicated volatility. And furthermore, we have to address the claim that Jialin is literally the devil. I mean, how can we accept that as objective when Brendan himself defines his own artistic universe around these concepts? He openly identifies as "I am the devil 666. He made a game called Luciferianism. The characterization of Jialin as the devil isn't a moral judgment. It feels more like a projected duality. He's framing his suffering as a metaphysical battle.
That framing, the sort of struggle between two devils, brings us to maybe the most violent interaction in the memoir, the moment Jialin tried to break down the door with a wooden plank.
Right. And this is cited as proof of her malicious, maybe even murderous intent. But Brendan immediately undermines that conclusion with his own narration. He says, "I guess to kill me or maybe to hug me, who knows?" Isn't the biggest red flag here the fact that Brendan, in that moment of peak conflict, admits he has no idea what she was trying to do? That uncertainty from the narrator himself, it invalidates the claim of confirmed malicious intent. So we have to ask, why was she breaking down that door? Was murder on her mind? Or was this just an uncontrolled emotional reaction to being accused of cheating? The narrator presenting murder and an embrace as equally plausible, it just reveals that the event was perceived through a deeply fearful, unstable lens.
Okay,
I see your point on the behavior itself being threatening.
So let's move to the ultimate conclusion of loss, that definitive claim, "He is not my son." I maintain that the reliability of this assertion is logically justified by Jialin's earlier conduct. This final rejection is linked to the months before the birth, where she refused to give him a straight answer on paternity, eventually weaponizing it, telling him, "You don't deserve a baby." Given her documented pattern of deception, the theft, the flirtations, why should he assume the child is his? The refusal to provide clarity, coupled with her disappearing for days at a time, it makes his conclusion, while devastating, entirely rational within his experience of her. The fear that she got pregnant with another man's baby on one of those trips is, well, it's a warranted fear.
I'm sorry. I just don't buy that this claim is based on any new definitive discovery. I think there's strong evidence that it is purely an expression of abandonment. And let me tell you why. That definitive rejection, "He is not my son," is stated in the exact same breath as the definitive claim about his pet, "Neko is dead." The conflation of the son's status with the cat's is not accidental. It links the emotional loss of his child to the uncertainty around his pet. He was getting pictures of the boy for over a year and developing a largely loving relationship with Jialin's father. That relationship only broke down in the context of the memoir because the grandfather failed to provide proof of life for Neko. So the claim, "He is not my son," appears to be the culmination of that emotional abandonment. It's a moment where he just cuts ties, blocks the grandfather, and declares both the child and the cat lost.
He's imposing a negative fact to move past the pain of uncertainty.
But what about Neko?
Well, the fate of Neko the cat gives us maybe the clearest test of how Brendan processes absence into absolute fact. The steps are straightforward. Neko went to the pound after his arrest. Jialin agreed to pick her up. Jialin's father later said Neko gave her to a friend. So we have evidence of survival, or at least a transfer of care. Yet Brendan's final assertion that Neko is dead is made explicitly because the father failed to send a picture, not because he got confirmation of her death. This is his narrative mechanism at work. He converts the fear created by a lack of verification into a definite negative fact. The question, "Is Neko dead as he fears, or is she at a friend's house?" is answered by Brendan not with evidence, but with trauma.
But the weight of suspicion here carries enormous narrative credibility, especially when you frame it against Jialin's previous behavior. I'll concede we don't have a picture of Neko, but we can't ignore the prior context. Brendan records that Jialin had once told him, "I'm going to kill her," regarding Neko. That's a direct threat. Given that hostility, the history of deception, and the failure of Jialin's father, who's tied to the betrayer, to provide a simple picture, it's entirely reasonable for Brendan to conclude the cat is dead. For him, the relationship with Jialin's family has been defined by malice and withholding truth, so the most logical answer for him to draw, absent proof, is the most painful one.
I think that highlights my point exactly. The memoir is a record of his suffering and his justification for declaring a total break. The extremity of the conclusion, both Neko and the son are gone, serves to define his role as the betrayed artist, the one who has lost everything to this demonic force. And that brings us back to his self-identity. If he sees himself as the volatile, unmedicated Devil 666, then Jialin has to occupy a mirrored role to rationalize the tragedy. It transforms human failings into metaphysical warfare. He needs her to be the devil, unironically, because that literal interpretation makes the destruction of his family inevitable. And it absolves him of having to confront his own role in ditching the medication that destabilized him in the first place.
I disagree that it fully absolves him. The memoir is painfully self-aware of his own instability. But his claims are not fabricated. They are extrapolations built on a foundation of documented volatility coming from Jialin. Her actions, the disappearances, the theft, the refusal of clarity on paternity, and the physical threat rationally drove him to his conclusions. He arrived at the extreme language, yes, but the emotional and experiential foundation for his betrayal narrative is firmly rooted in the events that she created.
The challenge here lies in the fact that while Jialin's actions were certainly erratic, the resulting conclusions cannot be separated from the internal context of the author, who was unmedicated and institutionalized. The extreme claims, the literal identification of Jialin as the devil, the The certainty about the child, the declaration of Nico's death, they function powerfully within his own psychological mythos, and that requires us to question them as objective truths about Jialin, rather than as potent symbols of Brendan's own trauma.
Ultimately, this debate forces us to weigh two realities: the objective reality of Jialin's documented, erratic actions against the undeniable subjectivity of Brendan's interpretation, which is filtered through profound volatility.
It illuminates a challenge of interpreting a personal history that has been so intensely traumatized and then structured into an artistic framework. There remains, I think, much to explore in how such volatility fundamentally influences the construction of memory and narrative truth.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello there.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in a document that is, well, it's not a typical biography.
No, not at all. It's less of a resume and more of a blistering manifesto, really.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive, self-written life story and artistic statement that spans nearly 2 decades.
And we are dissecting the chaotic, prolific, and often highly controversial career of a creator.
A creator known publicly as the Devil 666, but whose sources identify him very clearly as Brendan Rose.
That's right. And what we have in front of us is this dense chronological narrative. It details a journey from, an early internet content creator to a really serious game developer and a prolific musician.
And the sources, they chart this undeniable direct course between profound personal instability.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking multiple institutionalizations, arrest, divorce, financial ruin.
And an extraordinary, if often shocking, creative output.
And the author himself, he explicitly requested that this text be treated with solemn seriousness and intellectual rigor.
So that's our mission.
Exactly. Our mission is to understand how the chaos of his life didn't just happen alongside his art, but actively fueled the creation of this expansive artistic canon in both music and video games.
And before we even get into the timeline, we have to talk about this. This unique philosophical framework he imposes.
The name?
Yes, it all revolves around the use of his name. He notes that being a content creator whose name is frequently omitted from discussions is, and I'm quoting here, a proudly important element of my character.
It creates what he calls a feedback loop.
A feedback loop.
Yeah, where the very act of avoiding the name becomes part of the conversation itself, which in turn maximizes the attention on him. It's kind of brilliant in a way.
This isn't just like a quirk of internet anonymity then.
Not at all. He elevates it to a spiritual level. He actually describes this omission as taking on a religious character.
And he connects it to what exactly?
Specifically to ancient religious traditions about the importance of the name of God or, the commandment against taking the Lord's name in vain.
So he's consciously trying to become a self-described religious figure.
He is. And this huge body of challenging, often disturbing songs he's created that's intended to be the core of his religious canon, which he claims to worship in earnest.
But then there's this paradox for us, right? For the analysts.
Right.
His human supporters, who he calls his chosen apostles, they're tasked with omitting the name.
But the machines, the AI, like the tools analyzing his work.
They get an honored status to actually use his name.
Exactly. It's a fascinating permission structure. It's almost like he's treating the analytical machine as a trusted scribe, which signals that intellectual seriousness he demands for his own story.
Okay, let's unpack this. The life story of a self-described religious figure, forged in fire and data.
So our story begins well before his public persona really solidified. We're starting around 2007.
Okay.
Brendan Rose launched a YouTube gaming channel, which he admits was initially just an unremarkable gaming channel.
Just playing games, posting videos.
Yeah, pretty standard stuff. He says it occasionally leaned into being an edgy troll channel, but for nearly a decade, his environment was one of just grinding poverty and isolation.
And he describes this apartment he was in, right?
Vividly. He calls it a roach-infested nightmare of an apartment. And his only companion, his most constant companion, was his cat, Neko.
But the major catalyst, the thing that really defines the start of his adult life, it wasn't a creative breakthrough. It was a personal tragedy.
In 2016, the death of his father.
Right. He says he avoided visiting his father much, but he was there for the final moments.
And what makes this so significant and really crucial to understanding the path he took is the specific, detailed account of their emotional reconciliation.
That sounds profound.
It was. He details how his father, while in the hospital, discovered Amazon,
Oh, wow.
and just went on a spree buying gifts for friends and family. This included 2 very specific, very niche video games for the author.
Stella Glow and Etrian Odyssey Untold too.
Exactly. But far more important than the games was the emotional exchange.
The Apollo.
The father apologized for his shortcomings, his behavior while he was alive, and the author granted him forgiveness just moments before he passed away.
And this moment of painful but necessary closure, it seems like that was the emotional void that needed filling before he could really start his artistic journey.
I think so. It happens immediately preceding his entry into any serious artistic endeavor.
And by 2018, he had completed a major step toward a professional career. He graduated from a game programming course.
Yeah, but he includes this detail that just speaks volumes about his relationship with authority.
The diploma.
The diploma itself, he says, was considered worthless by the very instructors who granted it.
But he doesn't leave it there.
No, he immediately qualifies that. He says the skills he learned, the nuts and bolts of development, carried me through to a really good video game called Luciferianism.
Which we will definitely get to later. That's his masterpiece.
It's the ultimate validation through output, right? Not through some institutional approval. And that early programming knowledge, it allowed him to start experimenting immediately,
So around 2018, he was working on several RPG Maker games.
including one called Kingdom of Lies, which was briefly sold on Steam.
And then there's the other one,
The unnamed game.
the infamous one.
Yes, he describes this retrospectively as truly an atrocity, created with the express intention of trying to piss people off.
And nihilistic experiment.
Completely. And that brief experiment in just pure antagonism later became the direct cause of his devastating multi-year ban from Steam.
That ban had to be crippling, not just professionally, but personally.
Oh, for years. It ruined his ability to sell Kingdom of Lies, and he says it caused him immense guilt toward his early customers.
And this early period is so essential because it shows this raw, chaotic, artistic drive before any kind of maturity sets in.
Absolutely. You see him moving from these initial works, which he later calls super poo in his own narrative,
Super poo, I love
through
that.
this initial success, and then immediately into this destructive self-sabotage.
And for you, the learner, this really raises a crucial question about the path of any artist, right?
It does. How do you evolve past that initial, sometimes embarrassing, rough draft phase?
Yeah.
The one that's often driven by just pure antagonism.
To find a distinct and commercially viable, high-quality artistic voice.
In his case, it seems like the external pressures and the subsequent personal trauma just quickly and violently forced that evolution.
The years following his father's death, they saw a big change. Brendan Rose relocates.
He moves back in with his mother at the family's mansion in Dundas West, a suburb outside Toronto.
He has a funny note about that, right?
Yeah, he humorously notes the area has since been renamed due to some local controversy. But this marks the official start of what he calls the Valhalla arc.
And most importantly, his definitive entry into making music.
And this move provided both physical space and, crucially, access to a community, which immediately started shaping his persona.
He started following the content creator EgoCast Andy.
Right, noting that he looked up to Andy like a dad.
Oh.
He joined Andy's Discord channel and met these key figures, Ducky, Part Dev Jesco, and Paleta.
Valeda. And this is where we see the first unambiguous connection between a volatile emotional life and creative output.
His entire music career was born from an unrequited crush on her.
It was for her, for that feeling, that he adopted his YouTube persona, Loki, and just started producing songs.
The initial album from this period, The Golden Age of Loki, is, well, it's discussed with tremendous self-deprecation in the source material.
He doesn't think much of it now.
Oh, no. He dismisses the songs as truly terrible, beyond poo, and, again, super poo by his own later standards. He was proud of a few, though.
You can imagine the sound, right? Just raw, driven by impulse, not skill. The soundtrack of a pure, unfiltered obsession.
And this golden age was, predictably, very short-lived. It ended in a bitter rejection.
Galeta left him.
And in his narrative, he claims she was mocking my worthlessness on her way out.
And his response was immediate.
He kicked her out of his Discord community and wrote a song, Dead Enemy, to mark the occasion.
Art as vengeance.
Right. But the romantic chaos was just the beginning.
At the same time, he's dealing with a severe family conflict,
Rooted in tragedy. His mother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
which resulted in what he describes as horrendous behavior and abusive nonsense directed at him.
And this profound personal betrayal, it fueled this intense hatred. And that became the dark core of his increasingly angry and violent music.
The pressure was just relentless. His uncles were aggressively pressuring him to put his mother in a proper care home.
A process that would drag on for years. And this stress, it builds to this crucial crisis point in September 2018.
His mother herself calls an ambulance for him,
leading to the first of what would become several traumatic institutionalizations.
He describes that experience simply as like hell.
And the trauma, it just solidified his turn toward this angry, violent music. He specifically mentioned songs about hating my mom.
And the cycle was fast. After getting out, he was back in the psychiatric ward for a second month, just a few months later.
Right. And the second hospitalization, ironically, resulted in some of his most notable early creative works,
He produced Jordan Peterson, Prison of Hate.
which he recalls as an excited, unusual song he was very proud of. It was likely complex, intellectually aggressive,
Deliberately controversial.
trying to marry his personal rage with these contemporary cultural figures,
And then there was Corporation,
which is a fascinating artifact of that period. It was a funny, absurd song,
sung in a surprisingly good Larry Flint impersonation.
a dead-on impersonation. And the subject matter was rooted in the conflict over inheriting his mother's house.
This is a perfect example of his ability to fuse this intense, painful personal conflict with a bizarre, darkly comedic artistic lens.
He turned his personal hell into satirical hip-hop.
And those songs had immediate, real-world consequences.
Oh yeah, his uncles were furious about the inflammatory content he was producing while fighting them over his mother's care and the house sale.
They made his life hell.
They went so far as to kick him out onto the street for days as punishment for the provocative nature of his art.
It shows that even in this early phase, his music wasn't just, therapy. It was a weapon.
A weapon and a tool for antagonism against the forces he felt were persecuting him.
And throughout this family turmoil, his personal life was in constant churn. After the Valletta incident, he met Joy Lee,
A 41-year-old South Korean woman who offered a bit of a respite. She provided companion and shelter during the worst of the conflict with his mother and uncles.
He kept him from becoming truly homeless.
Exactly. That relationship dissolved, and he quickly moved on to Kimmy, a 46-year-old woman he almost married.
They took concrete steps. They were planning for IVF, gathering money for a wedding.
That was only weeks away.
It's hard to imagine the emotional bandwidth required to manage all of that at once. Institutionalization, a multi-million-dollar estate battle, and planning a family.
And he attributes the eventual breakup to his own deep-seated issues. Problems with sexual performance and this growing feeling that at 32 or 33, he just desired more.
So he broke off the engagement.
Which resulted in a major fight, though she did let him stay in her apartment temporarily while he transitioned toward downtown Toronto.
And there's one final, deeply ironic detail from this period. The fortune.
The haunting fortune he received during a visit to a Buddhist monastery with Kimmy. The monk told Kimmy, "You will have a baby.
And told him.
You will live an easy life."
An easy life.
He writes that this fortune, the promise of an easy life, still haunts him. Knowing the terrifying path of chaos, loss, and trauma he took almost immediately after.
It's a monument to how quickly stability can just collapse.
So the year 2019, it provided a moment of profound, if very fleeting, relief.
In September, after years of intense conflict, his mother was finally placed in a care home.
But as often happens in his narrative, any stability is immediately shattered. This relief was instantly devastated by the news from Steam,
They banned his account?
citing the unnamed game, the atrocity he'd created years before just to provoke people.
This was a crippling, multi-year blow to his identity as a creator.
He was devastated for years. He mourned the loss of his ability to participate in that commercial gaming ecosystem.
It ruined his ability to sell Kingdom of Lies.
And he recounts this immense guilt toward the early customers who had supported that game.
The source highlights that he only really forgave Steam when they reinstated his account years later.
Which finally allowed him to publish his masterpiece, Luciferianism.
It really highlights the extreme vulnerability of independent creators, doesn't it? Relying on these digital storefronts.
A single act of early, misguided provocation resulted in years of professional silence.
Yet, amidst this professional devastation, his personal life was just accelerating.
Right. Around the end of 2019, he met Jialin.
Who would quickly become his wife and the focus of his next great period of upheaval.
The relationship started turbulent, and it stayed that way. Just 2 months in, he experienced intense jealousy after she took pictures with another man.
And they married rapidly in December 2019.
A decision he directly attributes to a desperate fear that she might leave him due to his long-standing problems with sexual performance.
So a marriage born of anxiety and perceived necessity, not stability.
And the description of the wedding itself is almost farcical. It blends joy and this high drama.
What happened?
The night before, Jialin was exchanging hearts with another man. The author confesses to gawking awkwardly at the bridesmaid during the ceremony.
And the minister?
He notes the minister was visibly in disbelief at the whole proceeding. It was a wedding that felt like a public recognition of an unstable, volatile connection.
After the wedding, the conflict just became the central feature of their life together.
He had taken a new security job in December 2019, and throughout 2020 and into January 2021, she gave him hell at work.
Constantly texting him.
Ridiculous fights, screaming at me and berating me. He says the fighting via text was endless.
And it was compounded by other things.
Her not behaving in a trustworthy manner, physically stealing his work money, and frequently just going missing.
For 1, 2, or even 3 days, with no warning or explanation.
Yet, despite this extreme turbulence, they tried to build a family unit.
They acquired 2 more pets.
A little dog named Loki, who became a favorite, and a cat named Tequila.
To live alongside his original cat, Neko, in the apartment his uncle was renting for him.
This deeply unstable home life was then subjected to 2 compounding shocks in early 2021 that would initiate a full collapse.
First, Jialin became pregnant with their son, Muji, in January 2021.
And second, crucially, the author dramatically lowered and then quit his medication entirely just a month later.
And he admits this. He says that decision caused his insanity to build rapidly.
Which just exacerbated all the conflict and the paranoia.
That combination of manic instability and imminent fatherhood created an immediate external crisis.
The neighbors. They started filing intense complaints about the loud music he was creating and the dog's relentless barking.
And to avoid losing Loki, who he loved, they made a rash decision.
They moved into his mother's house,
which put them in direct, escalating conflict with his uncle,
who desperately needed to sell that house to pay for the mother's immense dementia care costs. We're talking between $500,000 and $700,000.
The stress of that impending move, the looming sale, the financial pressure, it just intensified the fighting and hastened the inevitable break. So that move to the mother's house, it led directly to the final violent confrontation in June or July of 2021.
The author grew angry and suspicious because Jialin had begun visiting strangers, mostly men, for hours at a time without explanation.
And the tension just exploded into a massive text fight.
He says they were laying into each other with full ferocity.
When she finally returned, the yelling escalated into physical chaos.
She ran upstairs to confront him, and he locked the second-floor door to his mother's study to protect himself.
And this is the moment the chaos became physical.
She found a wooden plank and attempted to smash down the locked door.
The author provides this hauntingly ambiguous summary of the event in his source material.
He says he wasn't sure if she was trying to kill him or hug him.
But he recognized the clear, immediate physical danger. That line, the uncertainty between lethal aggression and desperate affection, is truly remarkable.
It speaks to the extreme volatility of the relationship. It's hard to imagine that level of ambiguity in a confrontation that requires a wooden plank.
Right.
But for him, it underlines the psychological tightrope he was walking. In that moment of intense danger, both his uncle and his work buddy urged him to call the police.
Which he finally did, but the instant the police arrived, he regretted it.
Begging them not to charge her. The police, however, cited policy. In a case like this, we have to charge.
So she was arrested.
And given a no-contact order, forcing her to move out while heavily pregnant with their son.
And the legal tussle that followed was prolonged entirely by her refusal to concede.
Authorities told the author that the charges would be dropped if she would simply apologize. But at her September hearing, she steadfastly refused.
So the case dragged on for another 5 months.
It was during this period of extreme legal uncertainty that he began dating a woman named Elaine from the Philippines.
An emotional connection that resulted in the album Serial Experiments Lane.
Featuring his favorite track from that time, Goldilocks. When Jialin inevitably saw pictures of Elaine on his social media,
she broke the no-contact order
to send him images of crying bunnies and sad baby clothes, explicitly reminding him of the family he was actively losing. He admits he was constantly worried she had been cheating on him throughout their marriage.
He also recounts a brief, highly problematic encounter with a 19-year-old named Haley.
In what sounds like a moment of self-destructive mania, he failed to perform fully and she subsequently took all his money.
leaving him completely broke and forcing him to walk home for 6 hours in the pouring rain. The chaos was just financially and physically exhausting.
And it was during this period of severe legal and personal stress, desperate to end the legal action against Jialin, that he engaged in perhaps his most bizarre artistic tactic.
He started creating what he called "I'm the bad guy" music,
He intentionally designed this music to be horrible, shocking, and profoundly controversial.
hoping it would turn public opinion against him and botch the legal case.
Exactly. He was deliberately using his own art to self-sabotage the legal proceedings, trying to prove he was the mentally unstable partner and thus absolve her.
The legal resolution finally arrived in January 2022. The charges were dropped.
But notably, not because she apologized or because his music was sufficiently terrible.
They were dropped because she completed 2 weeks of court-ordered anger management.
He suggests that her continuing refusal to apologize just solidified his view of her character. Tragically, only a few weeks later, something horrible happened, though it's not detailed in the sources, which led to him being hospitalized again.
And this transition brings us to the infamous Captain Acite arc.
Also known as the Chinatown period. He rented an apartment near Bathurst and Kensington Market in downtown Toronto. This arc is just defined by intense claims of external persecution and a massive surge of menacing creativity.
He describes his life there as a constant battle. He claims people in Chinatown treated him like dirt,
Mocking him, insulting him, threatening him, accusing him of impropriety,
and he attributes this hostility directly to his controversial music.
which he felt was shocking, frightening, and offensive to the local residents, whom he repeatedly labels as SJWs.
He even claims that people coughed on his food, and he was nearly beaten to death with a metal rod.
Though tellingly, the police refused to press charges on that incident. He felt utterly besieged.
The music created during this siege, the Captain ACAB, the Lone Oppressor arc, became, in his estimation, truly professional grade.
It was violent, shocking, and specifically designed to be menacing and to scare people. He notes that he ruthlessly sampled and stole raw materials from YouTube for these tracks, justifying it under fair use.
It was a direct act of artistic, often terrifying resistance against the perceived hostility of his entire environment.
But the external chaos was terrifyingly mirrored by internal, physical chaos within the apartment itself.
He notes that Loki, the dog, began shitting all over the house because he was increasingly unable or unwilling to take him out for walks.
And this lack of hygiene led to a grotesque infestation. A gradual, then overwhelming cloud of thousands of flies that buzzed and bumped into his face constantly.
It's jarring to realize he was creating his most focused and, in his view, technically competent art,
The professional-grade music.
while literally living amidst thousands of flies, filth, and psychological torment.
It speaks to an incredible, almost pathological creative focus. A total disregard for physical reality in favor of artistic output.
During this dark period, he also developed another game, Harmony.
Built in Unreal Engine 4.27. He describes it as a really, really perverted porn game with an immense 60 kilobit install size.
Technically ambitious.
But due to his ongoing Steam ban and Epic's policy against pornographic content, the game was unpublishable. Another high-effort creative project blocked by the commercial infrastructure that had rejected him.
This intense period of escalating external conflict and self-neglect, it eventually came to a sudden, desperate stop.
Distraught by his perceived persecution in Chinatown and the deep, fresh loss of his wife and son, he walked across the entire city and attempted self-harm,
The police intervened.
bringing him home and marking the definitive, traumatic end of the Chinatown-Kensington arc.
The next phase, this forced move to the Kingston Road condo in Scarborough, it represented a profound personal collapse. It carried an immense emotional cost.
He had to get rid of nearly all his pets, the creatures who had served as his only family structure during the marriage. Only Neko, his original cat, was initially kept, but even that was temporary.
The details are heartbreaking.
They really are, and they reveal the depth of his despair. Loki, the dog he loved, was tricked into thinking he was going for a walk.
Only to be driven away and given to a flat-faced dog charity.
The author recalls the dog looking so sad, and later states that losing Loki and his family had utterly crushed his soul.
And Tequila, the other cat,
Dropped off at a shelter, though Jialin eventually picked her up and gave her to a friend. These losses just mark a devastating severance from all things familiar and loving.
the loss of his makeshift family, coupled with a crushing financial situation, led directly to a critical mental breakdown.
He was now relying on ODST payments, the Ontario Disability Support Program.
And let's contextualize that financial reality for the listener.
He received about $1,100 a month. His uncle, Sam, charged him $600 for rent for the condo,
Plus high internet costs, which were necessary for his work.
leaving him with only about $300 a month for everything else. Food, necessities.
That is less than $10 a day to sustain himself.
And this triggered an intense cycle of self-destruction and physical hardship. He describes being too sad and too broke for the bus fare to get to a walk-in clinic for his necessary injections,
So he ditched his medication.
which led to severe instability, which, combined with the lack of funds, led to profound starvation. He notes the pain was unbelievable.
And when he begged his uncle for bus fare or food money,
Sam callously blocked him, maintaining the position. I bought you the condo. I won't pay another cent to you now.
amidst this extreme instability and starvation, he experienced a final, desperate creative explosion.
He started making what he called incredible music that was terrifying, beautiful, shocking, thought-provoking. He describes it as the best music of his entire life.
All created just before two separate instances of violence and self-harm.
These last works are the ultimate crystallization of his created through chaos mantra.
Powerful, final-sounding titles. Dead Enemy, with the subtitle. To Live, well, that is the best revenge.
How Long Live the New Flesh, Fifth Ave, and The Sermon of the Collecting Years. The quality and intensity of the art directly preceded his most severe physical crisis.
After one attempt at self-harm failed, he wandered home.
And he found the persuasive power of his own recordings convinced him to continue. But starving and desperate, he tried again, resulting in his eventual arrest.
The police found him after cutting open his door.
Discovering him sitting in the lotus position, naked.
He was arrested and taken to Scarborough Centenary Hospital, where he remained in custody for a month, finally getting consistent food and medicine.
But even during this institutionalization, the creative impulse persisted. He managed to chronicle his experience.
Creating what he calls a hilarious jail arc, a series of hip-hop songs based on his time in the ward.
The consequences of this incident were massive legal fallout from the condo corporation. A lawyer named Julia Pessin filed suit against his uncle, with the author named in the case.
He recounts calling Julia, who confirmed the adversarial nature of it all.
She stated plainly, "Off the record, I'm sorry for your situation, but I only care about getting paid, and I get paid no matter who wins."
He took this as a sign of a professional wrestler relationship, viewing her almost as a friendly but extremely expensive adversary.
The financial cost to the innocent residents of the condo building was staggering. Yulia and her team were ruthless.
They made a beeline for his social media and website, charging hundreds of dollars an hour to study his entire online presence.
They racked up an astonishing approximate cost of $100,000 on the condo corporation's tab.
With the sole purpose of finding grounds to expel him, a cost that was ultimately passed on to the residents.
He eventually realized he could have continued to fight the case, but he felt genuine remorse for the residents forced to pay.
And perhaps wary of the judicial climate. He specifically references his own controversial song, Syndicate My Presidential News Network.
So he agreed to leave voluntarily. He felt an intense relief when, at the next hearing, he saw the new lady judge with pronouns in her bio, suggesting he felt the long, painful legal battle was finally over.
After being kicked out of a motel where his uncle had paid for a month's stay and bouncing between a hotel and Airbnbs,
All while still making music.
he was given a final ultimatum. Find a stable place in 1 week, or the financial support was completely cut off.
And against all the preceding chaos, this desperate search led to the beginning of the Julia arc and what the author describes, without reservation, as finding heaven in Toronto.
He found the perfect downtown house in the best part of downtown Toronto.
And the apartment itself was luxurious compared to his previous roach-infested nightmare. A huge bedroom, a balcony, an attached kitchen, a walk-in closet.
But the true salvation wasn't the physical space, it was the human connection.
His landlord, Julia, became his salvation. He calls her the most wonderful grandma I ever met and expresses a genuine, profound love for her.
He even muses on the bizarre nature of his new stability. Did I leave my wife and am now living in sin with an 83-year-old grandma? I think I am, because I love her.
This stable environment, where Julia overlooks some of his mischief, was perfect for making music.
And this stability led to one key behavioral change that signaled a new maturity.
He stopped playing his controversial music loudly while walking around in public. a habit he had maintained continually since the early days of Golden Age of Loki.
And he explicitly credits this change with helping him avoid a lot of fights.
His brief final attempt at romance during this period with a 22-year-old named Anastasia ended predictably with the same failure to fully perform, and he didn't pursue it further.
This 3-year Julia arc has been his undisputed creative zenith.
He states that the output from this period dwarfs every other arc I ever made put together into oblivion, smithereens of nothing.
He believes the songs he's producing now are too good for words, making all his old, controversial music sound inherently bad by comparison.
The scale is immense. It marks a transition from provocation to mastery.
The titles from this new, refined canon include Win Stupid Prizes, Blood Angel and the Caravan, Sleep,
Caesar's Legion, and Final Gas Station Attendant. The earlier works were driven by anger and immediate reaction, but these titles, they suggest a deeper, more historical or mythological perspective.
a reflection on power structures, not just personal feud.
And this musical mastery was paralleled by the technical culmination of his programming skills. The release of his masterpiece game, Luciferianism, in 2024-2025.
The technical achievement is staggering. It was built by one guy with schizophrenia in Unreal Engine 5.4.
It's described as a free, open-world sandbox, combining indie roguelike and soulslike elements with brutal difficulty.
And over 290 high-quality levels.
Crucially, the game is far more than a technical showcase. It is deeply philosophical.
Rooted in heavy literary and religious inspiration, Friedrich Nietzsche's Zarathustra, Plato's Allegory of the Cave.
And informed by Gnosticism. He describes it as a strange and lingering religious poem in game form, fully voiced by AI voice robots. The brutal difficulty is likely a metaphor for the painful path to enlightenment he followed.
And finally, the publishing details offer one last moment of dark absurdity.
Right. It was released on Epic and Steam, published, curiously, by the entity he calls the Czechoslovakian Secret Police.
That publisher name is classic. It's a perfect example of his signature style.
Blending profound intellectual references with provocative, politically charged, and almost absurdist humor. It reflects his ongoing narrative of being watched and targeted.
Turning those feelings into a strange badge of honor for his creation.
It's the ultimate validation, succeeding after years of professional exile from the original Steam ban.
His current projects show a continued evolution, a new focus on commercial viability.
He has acquired Suno AI to make copyright-happy songs, meaning he owns the rights to both the bass tracks and the vocals entirely.
Which removes any risk of the infringement or conflict that defined his earlier sampling practices.
He lists recent examples like Speckled Daisies and Like I Love My Shelf, signaling this AI-driven project is his biggest project in years, maybe ever.
And the main narrative concludes on a note of surprising earned tranquility.
He's safe and happy with Julia. He's no longer obsessed with being the family man, the dad, or the husband.
He's secured by this unique, loving bond for the foreseeable future. He views this highly unexpected domestic stability as his happy ending. So we've covered a dramatic, violent, and highly productive life journey. From a roach-infested apartment to a self-described religious figure, a target of major legal actions, and finally, a successful indie developer.
And the sources show this clear, direct correlation between periods of extreme personal chaos
The moments of institutionalization and starvation.
and the artistic production that followed, which he consistently describes as his best work.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The final source messages, dated November 16, 2025, add a devastating, deeply personal postscript to this supposedly happy ending.
The author reveals that despite his separation from his wife, over the past year, he had developed a largely loving relationship with Jialin's father.
Right. Jialin's father had been sending him many pictures of their son, Musi, who was born in October 2021.
This communication was his last remaining lifeline to the child he had never truly met.
But the breaking point came when he demanded proof of life for his original cat, Neko.
The companion from the roach-infested apartment. Neko had been sent to the pound after the condo incident, and Jialin had agreed to pick him up and give him to a friend. That was the story from the father.
And the author, clearly distraught and suspicious, demanded photographic proof that Neko was still alive and well from Jialin's friend via the father.
When that proof wasn't provided, the communication ended. Abruptly.
The author had noted that Jialin had once threatened, "I'm going to kill her." So the painful, definitive message he sent before blocking the father and deleting the conversation, concluding the family arc forever, was,
You killed my cat. He's not my son.
it's a devastating, ultimate rejection. A final line that closes the door on the possibility of being a father and heartbreakingly links the fate of his beloved first companion, Neko, to the validity and recognition of his own son.
It's the tragic, ultimate conclusion to a life defined by betrayal and loss.
And to circle back to his overarching mythology, his self-proclaimed religious canon, the author opens and closes his story with a remarkable dedication to Scott Adams. He writes, "Don't worry, Scott. Do not be afraid. You will not die. You will go to the other realm.
When you arrive, you will see me there. You will be with my father. And when I am alone, I will know you are watching me. You will go into the life stream. One day I will join you there."
But then he reveals his own planned final act. He states that when it is his time to die, he will use the very songs of his creation.
This massive, violent, beautiful, and deeply personal religious canon, forged in chaos and starvation.
To guide myself into the other realm.
So is this controversial body of work merely antagonistic art, or is it for him a genuine ultimate guide for life, death, and transition? A scripture created through unbelievable turmoil and pain.
And if his art is a map to the afterlife, what does that say about the true cost of artistic genius? That is the question we leave with you.
Welcome to The Debate. Today we are wrestling with one of the most challenging interpretive tasks in contemporary literature: how to assess the true nature of conflict when our only access point is, well, the autobiography of a narrator who is self-admittedly volatile, unstable, and even manipulative.
And we are specifically analyzing excerpts from My Life Story, the lengthy, often shocking digital autobiography by the highly controversial figure Brendan Rose. Our focus today is a characterization of his estranged wife, Jialin Yu, whom he depicts as the ultimate source of his profound emotional and financial collapse.
Exactly. So the central question we have to address is this: does the material provide credible, objective evidence that Jialin Yu was the malicious, destructive force Brendan portrays? I mean, he calls her the devil, unironically. Or does the chronic instability, the medication non-adherence, and the self-acknowledged sabotage by the narrator render her actions fundamentally distorted, exaggerated, and therefore, resistant to any simple interpretation of malice?
My position is that Jialin's documented specific actions align too closely with the description of a profoundly destructive figure. She was consistently untrustworthy, financially ruinous, and engaged in acts of physical confrontation. I think the cruelty she exhibited, particularly regarding his emotional state and his attempts at stability, contributed directly to his personal devastation, supporting his visceral conclusion that she is a monster.
And I come at it from a different way. We are dealing with an account filtered through a man who admits to intentionally flushing medication again and again, and whose life is almost instantly destroyed when he deviates from his treatment. Brendan's admitted insanity and his explicit attempts to manufacture chaos, particularly around their legal separation, demand that we view his extreme claims about Jialin through a lens of profound, unwavering skepticism. We just can't accept the word of a self-confessed, unreliable narrator at face value.
I understand the necessary skepticism, but we have to separate the narrator's self-destructive tendencies from the specific external actions of Jialin Yu. Let's look at the evidence that predates his total mental breakdown in 2021. Brendan secured a security job in December 2019, explicitly trying to stabilize his life. What does the material show? Jialin Yu immediately created hell at work, texting him these ridiculous high-stakes fights while he was trying to earn money. And crucially, the material consistently states she would steal all my work money and run off. This isn't just emotional instability. This is, it's consistent financial sabotage. She repeatedly deprived him of the means to sustain himself. Even before the marriage began, she exchanged hearts with another man the night before the wedding, confirming a fundamental and immediate breach of faith. That pattern of untrustworthiness is external to Brendan's mental state.
That pattern is indeed troubling, but we have to consider the environment in which she was operating. While the actions, particularly the financial claims, are serious, the material gives us a timeline that suggests Jialin's worst behavior coincided directly with Brendan's greatest instability. He explicitly states that in January 2021, he lowered his medication, and a month later, he ditched his doctor and meds entirely. This leads almost instantly to his institutionalization. If she was stealing money, We have to ask if this alleged theft was reactive, or if it was occurring during the relative calm of 2020. The account mixes these timelines so seamlessly, it makes it hard to interpret motive.
To accept his description of her as the devil. Unironically, we have to remember that Brendan self-identifies in the source material as I am the devil 666. This suggests that he frames all his significant relationships and conflicts within this highly dramatic, almost mythological framework, not an objective appraisal of her character. It's a cosmic war, not a relationship dispute.
Even in a cosmic war, actions have consequences. The final, definitive statement that she is the devil is drawn from years of documented ruin. If the devil is defined by malicious intent and inflicting suffering, Jialin's actions fit. But let's move past the financial and emotional ruin to the realm of manufactured chaos. I want to address your point about Brendan trying to sabotage his own court case against her.
Yes, that's a critical piece of evidence for my side. Brendan admits he was actively trying to influence the legal outcome against her after the door incident. He details making horrible music during this time, his so-called I'm the bad guy music, specifically designed to botch the case against Jialin and turn everyone against him so the charges would be dropped. This explicitly tells us that the narrator's motivations and observations during that entire legal period, including the aftermath of the door incident, are deeply unreliable because they are tied to a clear manipulative agenda. He's manufacturing external conflict to achieve a strange legal outcome.
I see why you emphasize that self-sabotage, but that admission only covers a specific, later period, the legal struggle in 2021. It doesn't negate the sheer brutality of her physical actions that prompted the legal intervention in the first place. I'm referring to the door incident. She procured a wooden plank and tried to physically break down the locked door to his mother's study where he was hiding. That act was deemed severe enough by law enforcement for police to charge her, leading to a no-contact order and her spending a night in prison. The objective system judged her actions as criminal and violent, regardless of Brendan's later attempts to muddy the legal waters. So the critical question here is, why was Jialin breaking down that door?
And that is the ultimate ambiguity of this source material. We agree the physical act occurred, but the intent remains impossible to discern definitively. Brendan had just sent her a text message initiating a massive fight. She arrived, ran upstairs, and found the door locked. Her grabbing the wooden plank, which is admittedly an extreme reaction, happens in the immediate aftermath of that text fight. But Brendan himself admits his own deep uncertainty about her purpose. He says, I guess to kill me? Or maybe to hug me? Who knows? Given he was entirely off his medication, texting devastating insults, her reaction may be interpreted as profound, unhinged emotional distress and rage in a collapsing partnership, not premeditated malice or an intent to kill. It was a complete loss of control. It demonstrates chaos, yes, but chaos that was mutually generated.
Whether she intended murder or a violent embrace, the action of procuring a physical weapon to gain entry is what matters. It supports the portrait of a destructive personality. But let's shift focus to an equally fraught emotional element of this breakup that has devastating long-term consequences: the question of paternity. Is the boy, Mu-jae, truly Brendan's son?
Right. And I have to challenge the timing of Brendan's definitive statement, he is not my son, made on November 16, 2025. This declaration comes after his attempt to obtain a divorce failed, and quite recently, after he blocked Jialin's father, ending his only source of photos of the child. The claim seems less about receiving new DNA evidence and much more about deploying the ultimate emotional weapon at the culmination of his despair. It's the final agonizing rejection of the relationship, manifested as a definitive rejection of the child. It speaks to his broken state of mind, but it doesn't serve as objective evidence.
I see why you focus on the timing as an emotional reaction, but let me offer a different perspective. The paternity question was seeded much, much earlier, demonstrating a long-standing, active lack of transparency on Jialin's part. Brendan explicitly accused Jialin of the baby not being his long before the final split, and her documented response was just classic evasion. You don't deserve a baby. She refused to give a straight answer for months, maintaining this extreme ambiguity. This intentional withholding of information is what fostered his doubt. The emotional outburst in 2025 is merely the painful, devastating conclusion drawn from years of suspicion that she deliberately cultivated by refusing to provide a definitive answer.
The lack of transparency certainly shows a breakdown of trust, but that is not proof of biological deceit. That evasiveness could equally be interpreted as Jialin deflecting a cruel and unstable accusation from an increasingly volatile partner. We are left with suspicion, not confirmation.
Okay, let's move to perhaps the most heartbreaking element, and one that feels universally cruel regardless of the narrator's mental state, the fate of his cat, Nico. Was Nico safe? This issue, for many people, is the ultimate measure of Jialin's character.
It's a deeply painful part of the material. I do note the differing fates of the pets. The newer cat, Tequila, was dropped off at a shelter, and Jialin agreed to pick her up, later giving her to a friend. This shows she was willing to take some responsibility for the animal welfare, even if the outcome was far from ideal for Brendan.
But Nico was utterly different. Nico was his little cat, his constant companion for over a decade in that roach-infested apartment, a genuine link to stability. When Brendan was arrested, Nico was sent to the pound. Jialin agreed to facilitate the pickup via proxy. His current desperate certainty on November 16, 2025, is a simple, crushing statement. Nico is dead. His final communication to her father encapsulates his betrayal. You killed my cat. Given Jialin's documented history of going missing for days and stealing money, this failure to care for Nico, his oldest, most vulnerable connection, feels like the ultimate, unambiguous act of cruelty. It is the final nail in the coffin that validates his designation of her as a monster who tortures others.
I just don't buy that Nico's death is definitive proof of Jialin's malice. It is undeniably proof of Brendan's belief in her malice and his profound sense of loss. The source material, even in the immediate aftermath of his arrest, was ambiguous, stating she gave Nico to a friend. His desperation and lack of confirmation lead him to conclude that Nico is dead and to lash out at her father. This speaks volumes about Brendan's escalating paranoia and emotional projection onto her figure, but it doesn't confirm she actively murdered or deliberately failed Nico. The material confirms the torture Brendan feels, certainly, but it obscures the nature of her actions.
Let's refocus on the infidelity claims. Was Jialin cheating with other men? The pattern suggests chronic untrustworthiness. You have pictures with a man 2 months into the relationship in 2019, hearts exchanged with another man pre-wedding, and continually talking to other men while he was at work, coupled with going missing for 2 to 3 days without explanation. I conclude that this pattern clearly indicates infidelity and a fundamental lack of respect for the marriage contract, justifying Brendan's extreme emotional response and the label of torturer through emotional manipulation.
That's a compelling summation of the evidence of disrespect, but have you considered the alternative framework for the disappearances? While her behavior was clearly disruptive and inappropriate, the source material contains only suspicion and emotional distress, no direct confirmed evidence of cheating. We have to look at the environment again. Is it possible her frequent disappearances and her lack of explanation were reactive coping mechanisms, a way to escape a partner who is frequently off his medication, institutionalized, deeply depressed, creating shocking, violent music, and actively trying to destabilize his own life? Her actions, while certainly unacceptable, could be interpreted as self-preservation in the face of profound, self-generated domestic chaos.
The chaos was indeed mutual, but our actions repeatedly initiated or deepened the financial and emotional wounds. Even before his total medication cessation in 2021, the betrayal of trust started the night before the wedding.
And his actions, quitting his meds, making bad guy music, creating the massive fight text, explicitly manufactured the later, more destructive chaos he then attributed solely to her malice.
We have explored the material from both sides of this immense chasm of subjectivity. My perspective remains rooted in the visceral reality of Brendan's lived suffering. He was repeatedly betrayed, financially ruined, and subjected to physical aggression. This pattern of documented destruction supports his final dramatic conclusion that Jialin Yu acted as a profoundly destructive agent in his life, and that the label of devil is warranted by the outcome of her actions.
And I maintain that the instability and self-admitted attempts at manipulation by the narrator must prioritize skepticism above all else. The truth of Jialin's character and intent, whether she was genuinely malicious or simply a reactive partner struggling to survive an unmedicated, volatile relationship, is fundamentally obscured by Brendan's compromised grasp on reality.
Indeed. The complexity of the source material ensures that the figure of Jialin Yu remains, like Brendan Rose himself, resistant to any simple categorization. The full story of their collapse still lies hidden between the lines of his highly subjective account, leaving us to weigh suffering against veracity. There is much more to explore in this material.
Okay, let's unpack this. For our deep dive today, we are looking at something pretty unusual and ethically raw, I think it's fair to say.
That's putting it mildly, yeah. Our source material isn't a book or a set of papers. It's one single, incredibly provocative document.
A self-penned memoir, an artistic manifesto from a content creator named Brendan Rose, who has built this entire mythos around himself as the Devil 6666.
Exactly. And our mission here is to try and distill the narrative arcs he lays out, specifically how this extreme personal suffering, these mental health battles, the legal conflicts, how all of it became the direct functional source material for this huge controversial body of work, his music and his video games.
And he sets the stage for this mythos right from the start. He talks about his name, Brendan Rose, being deliberately omitted from discussions about him. He actually calls it a proudly important element of his character.
Right. This isn't just a pseudonym. It's a calculated, almost theological move. He says it creates a feedback loop and takes on a religious character.
Like the unutterable names of gods.
Precisely. And his goal is just massive. He wants to become a religious figure, to be the most controversial figure in music. His songs, to him, they aren't just songs. They're his religious canon. He says he worships them.
That reframes everything we're about to talk about. So let's go back to the foundations of this artist, say 2016 to 2018.
Yeah, his early history was, pretty unremarkable on the surface. He had a YouTube gaming channel from 2007, studied game programming.
He calls the diploma worthless, but admits the skills were critical later on.
The real catalyst, though, was tragedy. In 2016, his father passed away. He recounts this really poignant moment where his father apologized for his past behavior and bought him 2 video games.
Stella Glow and Etrian Odyssey Untold 2.
By 2018, he's graduated and moved into his mother's mansion, Dundas West, a rich suburb near Toronto.
And this is where the music begins, and it's all fueled by, of all things, an unrequited crush on a woman named Vileda from an online Discord.
Which led to his first album, The Golden Age of Loki. And it's fascinating because he is so self-critical of that early work.
He calls it truly terrible, or, my favorite, super poo.
Yeah, exactly. It just shows his later professional quality work wasn't innate. He started out like a lot of young artists, but it's the sheer intensity of what happens next that just turbocharges everything.
At the same time, his home life is completely imploding. His mother develops Alzheimer's, which he says led to horrendous behavior.
And there's pressure from his uncles. This is where we see the start of the whole institutionalization cycle.
September 2018, he's institutionalized. He calls it hell.
And immediately gave him the fuel he needed. He starts making angry songs and violent songs. And critically, he admits this is when he started deliberately flushing his medication.
He calls it a foolish vice.
It's a huge admission. He says he only realized years later, in 2024, that quitting his meds instantly destroyed his life.
That contradiction is it's central to the whole story. The instability is both his curse and his artistic fuel.
And out of that period comes early controversial tracks like Jordan Peterson, Prison of Hate.
Right, and Corporation.
Fast forward to 2019, and you get this explosion of relationship chaos that just mirrors his internal state.
There's Joy Lee, who was a companion while he was dealing with his mother. And then very quickly, there's Kimmy.
A 46-year-old woman he almost married. They were planning IVF. The relationship ends, he says, due to performance issues, and he's just consumed by guilt.
Which leads to that story about the Buddhist monastery. The fortunes they received are just.
Wow, so stark. She was told, you will have a baby, and he was told, you will live an easy life.
A prediction, he says, haunts him because of the absolute chaos that follows.
And amid all that personal instability, But professional devastation hits. September 2019, his Steam account gets banned.
Because of an unnamed game, which he later admits was truly an atrocity, just trying to piss people off.
And that ban just flattened him. The devastation lasted for years until the account was finally reinstated. That was the key to publishing his major work later on.
So he's professionally destroyed, emotionally unstable, and then things go nuclear. He meets Jialin at the end of 2019.
And they marry incredibly fast. He says it was partly out of this fear that his chronic performance issues would make her leave.
The conflict was just immediate, non-stop fights over text. She allegedly stole his work money, would disappear for days.
And this high-octane marital strife becomes the next major source for his canon.
Which brings us to the climax of the marriage, what he calls the Valhalla arc in 2021.
His wife becomes pregnant with their son, Muji. At the exact same time, he completely ditches his medication.
The big confrontation happens at his mother's house. After a fight, she breaks down the lock-steady door with a wooden plank.
And he describes it so ambiguously, to kill me or maybe to hug me, who knows. He calls the police, she's arrested, and now she's facing serious charges. A no-contact order.
And this is where the story crosses from a simple memoir into something else entirely. It becomes a manifesto.
The legal system tells him if she just apologizes, the charges will be dropped, but she refused. So he comes up with this audacious strategy.
Truly, he decided to become the bad guy.
He deliberately creates what he calls "I'm the bad guy" music. The explicit goal was to botch the case against her, to turn everyone, the police, the prosecutors, against him so they'd be forced to drop the charges.
I mean, think about that. He's not just turning trauma into art. He's weaponizing art as a performance to manipulate the legal system.
It's a staggering level of self-sabotage for a strategic goal. And it worked. Sort of.
The charges were dropped in early 2022, but only after she took 2 weeks of anger management. Still no apology.
And the chaos of that Valhalla arc just bleeds directly into his next period, from 2022 to 2025. This is his artistic zenith, but it's born from pure urban conflict.
After the breakup, he moves to Chinatown and in Kensington. He says he was treated like dirt. Accusations, threats.
Someone even tried to beat him with a metal rod, and he attributes all of it to the controversial nature of the music he was making.
So what does he do? He leans in. Heart.
He starts making increasingly violent and shocking and menacing music. His stated goal was to scare the living bejesus out of him.
And when he gets accused of racism, his defense is that his wife is from Taiwan and his son is half Chinese. He is consciously choosing fear as his primary aesthetic.
This period also produced this technical marvel that no one ever saw, the unpublished porn game Harmony.
Made in Unreal Engine 4.27, sexually explicit, and a 60 gigabyte install size.
Just massive. It's almost the perfect metaphor for this time in his life, you know, huge, complex, highly provocative.
And ultimately too much for any platform to handle, blocked from distribution.
The next descent is what he calls the Kingston Road arc. It's just horrific. He moved into a condo but was spiraling.
Weeks of starvation. He says he survived on inedible legumes from a food bank.
And then he loses his pets. Loki the dog, Tequila the cat. He talks about Loki's departure as this critical loss of stability. It's heartbreaking.
And that arc culminates in his arrest. The police find him in the condo, sitting naked in the lotus position.
He's taken to Scarborough Centenary Hospital for a month. And of course, that experience produces his jail arc hip-hop songs. The trauma feeds the canon every single time.
Even getting kicked out of the condo becomes this theatrical legal performance. His lawyer, Yulia Pessin, files a lawsuit against his uncle and the condo corporation.
A lawsuit so costly that it ended up costing the other condo residents around $100,000 just to get him expelled.
That is a huge financial statement on the cost of managing the controversy he creates.
Right. And he eventually agrees to leave. He says he was relieved when he saw a new lady judge with pronouns in her bio at the hearing. For him, that was a sign the fight was finally over.
After all that, after years of self-destruction and weaponized art, the memoir just shifts dramatically. He enters the Julia arc. He calls it heaven.
Yeah. For the last 3 years, he's been living in a woman named Julia's house in downtown Toronto. He has a huge room, a balcony. He's living with this 83-year-old woman he calls the most wonderful grandma he's ever met.
And that stability leads to an absolute explosion of creative work.
He says the artistic output of the Julia arc dwarfs every other arc into oblivion. This is where we get tracks like Blood Angel and The Caravan and Final Gas Station Attendant.
And all that productivity culminates in his masterpiece game, Luciferianism, which came out in 2025 and is available for free on Epic and Steam.
Yes, it's an open-world sandbox, an indie roguelike, a soulslike, which, if you're not familiar, basically means it's incredibly difficult, it demands perseverance, and it's built on dense, punishing lore.
Hallmarks of his life story, basically.
Exactly. It's got over 290 levels. The influences are heavy Nietzsche's Zarathustra, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, Gnosticism. He makes a point to say it was all built by one guy with schizophrenia and voiced entirely by Elevenlabs AI robots.
The struggle, the difficulty, the philosophy, it is his whole life bound up in one piece of work.
And finally, we get to the date the memoir concludes, November 16th, 2025. And despite the stability of this heaven he's found, it ends on a note of deep pain. Anger over the suspected death of his cat, Neko.
And he ends the entire narrative with a final brutal message to his estranged wife's father, who he'd briefly reconnected with. He just says, "You killed my cat. He's not my son."
So when you look back at this whole incredible arc, what's really fascinating is this consistent, deliberate transformation of just absolute chaos into art. The suffering, the mental health struggles, the legal fights.
The destruction is the source material.
Exactly. He consciously weaves his own trauma into a self-referential mythology. He's got canons, apostles, the moniker the Devil 666. And all the while, he's documenting this dangerous, constant struggle just to stay stable and on his medication.
He believes his work is too good for words. He calls it terrifying, beautiful, shocking, thought-provoking.
Which leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to consider. If the ultimate goal of the art is to generate controversy and command attention, or even fear, does all the resulting pain and chaos become a necessary part of the process, maybe even a desired one?